What would you do if the people closest to you tried to murder you? If they poured acid on your face while you were pregnant, if they used their billions to make you look crazy? I'm Grace Whitmore. And that's exactly what happened to me. For 72 days, I fought back against a billionaire family that thought money made them untouchable, against a legal system designed to protect the powerful, against my own reflection that showed me a monster instead of a mother. This is the true story of fire, fury, and justice. Stay with me until the end. Drop a comment if you believe in karma, and subscribe because survivors stick together. They say fire purifies, but what they don't tell you is what's left after the flames. My name is Grace Whitmore, and 72 days ago, I believed in fairy tales. I believed that love could cross class lines, that wealth didn't corrupt, and that the man who held me at night would protect me from the world. I was wrong about everything. The morning it all began, Seattle rain drummed against our penthouse windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I stood in our kitchen, 6 months pregnant, blending a green smoothie while my husband Ethan reviewed patient files on his tablet. Dr. Ethan Blackwell, brilliant neurosurgeon, heir to the Blackwell Medical Foundation, the man who supposedly loved me despite my ordinary background. "You sure you want to keep working at the museum until 8 months?" he asked, his tone carrying that familiar mix of concern and condescension. "The donors can wait." I laughed softly. "I can't just sit around doing nothing." "Ethan, the new Impressionist exhibit bed needs someone to coordinate the installation, and it keeps me sane." He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're more than enough, Grace. You know that, right?" For a fleeting moment, everything felt perfect. We'd met 3 years earlier at a charity auction where I was working as a curatorial assistant, and he was giving a talk about innovative brain surgery techniques. He'd been charming, brilliant, and heartbreakingly humble. Against all odds, the billionaire surgeon fell for a girl who'd grown up in Spokane with a single mom and student loans. Our wedding at the Seattle Aquarium had been simple yet elegant: white roses, soft jazz, and laughter under the glass tunnel with sharks swimming overhead. But since moving into the Blackwell penthouse, I'd felt invisible walls tightening around me. His phone buzzed. A text flashed across the screen before he could swipe it away. The sender was saved as B.H. The message read, "Can't wait for Friday. Don't tell her." My stomach dropped. "Who's that?" Ethan didn't even blink. "Brooke Hartley, our gala coordinator. We're planning a donor surprise for the foundation. You'll love it." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. That afternoon at the Seattle Art Museum, my coworker Jennifer slid her phone across my desk. "You've seen this, right?" Her tone carried both pity and hesitation. On the screen was a photo from a private charity dinner. Ethan stood beside a stunning blonde woman, his hand resting lightly on her back. The caption read, "Dr. Ethan Blackwell, an event coordinator, Brooke Hartley at Intimate Donor Preview." "That was last Thursday," I murmured. "He told me he was in surgery until midnight." Jennifer winced. "I'm sure it's nothing. Grace, you know how tabloids twist things." But I knew, the way his hand curved around her waist, the way she looked at him like she already owned the room and him. That night, when Ethan came home, still wearing his scrubs, I asked softly, "How was the donor meeting last week?" He didn't flinch. "Productive, exhausting. I barely got out of there." "With Brooke Hartley." He froze for half a second, just enough for me to notice. "Brooke organizes every event for the foundation. You know that. Why are you suddenly suspicious?" "Because people talk," I whispered. He laughed bitterly. "Let them. You think I'd risk my career and our family over some event planner?" I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the image of that photograph burned behind my eyes. The next morning, I woke to find a small Tiffany box on the kitchen counter. Inside was a delicate diamond bracelet shaped like a vine. The note read, "For the woman who makes me whole, forever. E." My heart melted. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, hormonal, ridiculous. Ethan loved me. We were building a family. But that afternoon, scrolling through Instagram while waiting for a doctor's appointment, I found Brooke Hartley's profile. Photos of her at exclusive restaurants, charity galas, museum openings, And there, scattered among the glossy images, 3 photos with Ethan, intimate dinners, private viewings, moments I knew nothing about. In one photo, Brooke wore a silver locket, the same design Ethan had given me for our first anniversary. He'd said it was custom made, one of a kind. I sat in that waiting room, my daughter kicking inside me, and felt my perfect world begin to crack. That evening, I didn't confront him. Instead, I watched him carefully, the way he checked his phone constantly, the way he smiled at texts I couldn't see, the way he found excuses to work late. And I realized something terrible. I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel glittered like a palace of lies. Chandeliers cast golden light across the grand ballroom, where Seattle's elite mingled in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The Blackwell Foundation's annual gala, the event of the season, where millionaires wrote checks and pretended to care about medical research. I arrived alone. Ethan had left early to handle last-minute details. My emerald maternity gown hugged my growing belly, and for once I felt beautiful. Tonight, I told myself, would be about standing beside my husband proudly, proving that nothing could shake our bond. But the moment I entered, the air changed, conversations hushed, eyes shifted. I felt it immediately. That suffocating tension that only comes when everyone knows something you don't. At the center of the room stood Ethan, devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo, and beside him, Brooke Hartley. She wore a stunning silver gown that perfectly matched her locket, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder as she adjusted his bow tie. Cameras flashed. They looked like they belonged together. My heart stuttered. Then I saw her, Margot Blackwell, Ethan's adoptive sister, descending the grand staircase like a queen returning to her kingdom. At 38, Margot was everything I wasn't: polished, powerful, terrifying. Her ice blue gown probably cost more than my yearly museum salary. Every detail of the evening was curated to perfection, each embossed with her initials, M.B. She spotted me and smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Grace," she said smoothly, her voice silk over steel. "You look alive. How is the baby at Sam?" "Healthy," I replied evenly. "Thank you for asking." "Of course, we're family. After all," she leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "Though I do hope you're being realistic about your future here. Ethan's world demands a certain kind of partner, someone who understands the pressure, the expectations." "I understand perfectly," I said. Margot's lips curved. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a woman who's already been replaced." She glided away, leaving me trembling. I forced myself to walk toward Ethan. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Grace, you look beautiful." "Thank you, Bimete," I said, my gaze sliding to Brooke. "Miss Hartley, we finally meet properly." Brooke's smile was practiced. Perfect. "Mrs. Blackwell, what a gorgeous dress. When are you due?" "3 months." I kept my voice steady. "I see you've been keeping my husband very busy." Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, fear. Strictly business, I assure you. The donors demand perfection, and Ethan's quite the perfectionist. Before I could respond, the orchestra began playing. Ethan offered his arm. "Shall we?" We danced, but his body felt wrong against mine. Stiff, distant, over his shoulder. I watched Brooke talking to Margot, their heads bent together in conspiracy. "Ethan," I whispered, "be honest with me. Is something going on with Brooke?" He pulled back slightly. "We've been through this. She's a colleague, nothing more." "Then why does she have the same locket you gave me?" His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The silver locket. You said it was custom. One of a kind." "Grace, you're making a scene." "I'm asking my husband a question. And I'm telling you, you're being paranoid." His voice hardened. "The hormones are making you irrational." I stepped back, stung. Around us, couples continued dancing, oblivious to my world shattering. I fled to the coat check, needing air, needing space. Brooke's designer purse sat on the counter, unattended. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. Inside lipstick, breath mints, and a hotel keycard. Room 817. This hotel, tonight, my vision blurred with tears. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the cold Seattle rain. The underground garage was eerily quiet when I arrived home. I parked and stepped out, my heels echoing against concrete. The security lights that usually burn bright were dim, flickering. Something felt wrong. I heard footsteps. Quick, deliberate. "Hello," I called out. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to darkness. The power cut completely, plunging the garage into shadow, broken only by emergency exit signs. My phone was dead. I'd forgotten to charge it. Panic rose in my throat. "Is anyone there?" Heels clicked in the darkness. Expensive heels, the kind that cost $1,000. "You should have taken the money and left quietly." Margot's voice cut through the shadows. I spun around, trying to locate her. "What are you talking about? I offered you $2 million last month. Remember to disappear before that baby was born. You refused. Stupid girl." "Margot, please. I don't understand." Another set of footsteps. Softer. Hesitant. "I'm sorry." Brooke's voice trembled in the darkness. "I'm so sorry, Grace. She said we were just gonna scare you. Shut up and do it." Margot's command was ice cold. I backed against my car. "Do what? What are you?" Light flared briefly. In Brooke's shaking hands, I saw a silver thermos. "No," I whispered. "Please, I'm pregnant." "That's exactly the problem." Margot said. Brooke unscrewed the cap. I smelled it before I saw it. Chemical. Sharp. Wrong. "Brooke, don't." The liquid fire hit my face. Pain is a universe. It swallows everything: time, thought, identity. There's only the burning, the screaming, the desperate animal instinct to make it stop. I don't remember falling. I don't remember the security guard finding me 12 minutes later. I don't remember the ambulance ride, the sirens, the paramedics shouting medical terms I couldn't process. I remember one thing: the smell. Acid eating through skin smells like burned hair and melting plastic and death. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Machines beeping, fluorescent lights humming, the antiseptic hospital smell that clung to everything. I tried to open my eyes, but only one responded. The other was swollen shut, bandaged, wrong. "Don't move, Grace." A gentle voice, female, calm. "I'm Dr. Claire Ashford, chief of the burn unit. You're at Harborview Medical Center. You've been in surgery for 6 hours." "Surgery?" The word echoed strangely. "My baby," I croaked. My throat felt raw, damaged. "Your daughter's heartbeat is strong. She's a fighter, just like her mother." Tears leaked from my good eye. What happened to my face? Dr. Ashford's pause told me everything before her words did. "The acid caused second and third degree burns across 40% of your face and neck. We've done our best with initial grafts, but you'll need several more surgeries. Grace, I need you to understand, Sean. I want to see. That's not advisable right now. I want to see what they did to me." Silence. Then the soft rustle of movement. Dr. Ashford returned with a small hand mirror. "Remember, this is just the beginning of healing. What you see today won't be what you see in 6 months." She held up the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't me. Couldn't be me. The left side of her face was pink and raw, the skin puckered and shiny where grafts had been placed. A thick scar ran from her temple to her jaw. Her eye socket was swollen purple. Her lips were asymmetrical, twisted from the damage. A monster. They'd turned me into a monster. The mirror fell from my trembling hands. "Grace, get out." My voice broke. "Please, just get out." Dr. Ashford squeezed my shoulder gently and left. Alone, I let the sobs come, deep and ugly and endless. 3 days passed before Ethan visited. When he walked into my room, I saw it immediately: the horror he tried to hide, the revulsion that flickered across his face before he could school his features. "Grace, where?" he whispered. "My God, what have they done to you?" I turned my head away. "You know exactly who did this." He moved closer, reaching for my hand. I flinched away. "Don't look at me like that," I said. "Like I'm something broken you can't fix. I don't think that you can barely stand to be in this room." My voice was hollow. "I can see it in your eyes. Your beautiful wife is gone, and now you're stuck with this. That's not fair." "Fair," I laughed, a broken sound. Your sister tried to kill me. Your event coordinator threw acid on my face. And you're talking to me about fair. Ethan's jaw tightened. Margot has an alibi. She was on camera at the gala until 11 p.m. The attack happened at 10:45. It's impossible. I heard her voice. Ethan. She told Brooke to do it. You were in shock. In darkness. You can't be sure. Get out. Grace, please, get out. He left. He didn't come back for 10 days. Detective Iris Monroe visited that afternoon. Tall, sharp-eyed, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much. She pulled up a chair beside my bed. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm investigating your assault. I need you to tell me exactly what happened that night. I recounted everything. Margot's voice. Brooke's apology. The acid. The darkness. Detective Monroe's expression never changed. When I finished, she closed her notebook. Here's the problem, she said. Security footage shows Margot Blackwell on the hotel's main floor from 9:30 p.m. until 11:15 p.m. Multiple cameras, multiple angles. She never left. And Brooke Hartley's phone records show she was texting her sister in California from 10:30 to 11 p.m. That's impossible. I know what I heard. I believe you believe that, Mrs. Blackwell, but without physical evidence or witnesses, it's your word against theirs. And frankly, she hesitated. Margot Blackwell has considerable influence in this city, so she gets away with it. I didn't say that. We're still investigating, but I need you to prepare for the possibility that we might not be able to prove anything. After she left, I stared at the ceiling, feeling hope drain away like water through fingers. The next morning, news broke Margot Blackwell had donated $2 million to Harborview Medical Center specifically for my care and recovery. The hospital administrators issued a glowing press release. Local news picked it up. Headlines read, Blackwell Harris shows mercy to sister-in-law despite baseless accusations. I watched the coverage on my hospital room television. Numb. Margot was erasing me, making me look crazy, buying her innocence with blood money. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You can't win against her. Take the money and disappear while you still can. I deleted it and turned off my phone. That night, alone in the darkness of my hospital room, I whispered to my unborn daughter, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect either of us. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and fear, something else stirred. Something harder. Something that tasted like rage. Nate Sullivan walked into my hospital room on a Tuesday morning, carrying coffee from a local shop and the kind of confidence that comes from winning impossible cases. At 42, he had silver in his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes that somehow made him look more trustworthy. Mrs. Blackwell, he said they... Oh, he said, setting a latte on my bedside table. I'm Nate Sullivan. I specialize in cases where the rich think they're untouchable. I studied him carefully. And what makes you think I can pay your fees? I don't want your money. I want the story. He pulled up a chair. Margot Blackwell has been buying her way out of consequences for 20 years. 3 sexual harassment settlements at her company. 2 wrongful termination suits. A vehicular manslaughter charge that mysteriously disappeared in 2015, and she's had enough. How do you know all that? I'm very good at my job. He opened his briefcase. Detective Monroe asked me to take your case. She suspects Margot but needs hard evidence. That's where I come in. I can't afford to lose again, I said quietly. I've lost everything already. Then we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. His eyes were kind but fierce. Tell me everything. Mrs. Blackwell, every detail, no matter how small. Over the next hour, I recounted the entire nightmare. The gala, the hotel key card, the darkness, Margot's voice, Brooke's trembling hands, the acid. Nate listened without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, he tapped his pen thoughtfully. The hotel key card. Do you still have Brooke's purse? No, I left it at the coat check when I fled. But the coat check would have records, security cameras. He made another note. And you said the garage lights were deliberately cut. They flickered and died right before the attack. That's not an accident. Someone tampered with the electrical system. Nate stood. I'll need to interview the building's maintenance staff, check the electrical logs, pull any backup security footage from neighboring buildings. Detective Monroe said there was no evidence. Detective Monroe is bound by police procedure and warrants. I'm not, he smiled grimly. Rich people always make mistakes. They think money makes them invisible, but it actually makes them sloppy. We just need to find Margot's mistake. After he left, I felt something he hadn't felt in weeks, hope. That afternoon, another visitor arrived. Roman Pierce, tall and elegant in a charcoal suit, with steel gray eyes that missed nothing. I recognized him from foundation events, though we'd never formally met. Mrs. Blackwell, he said, remaining in the doorway. May I come in? Who are you? Roman Pierce, I used to sit on the Blackwell Foundation board until Margot forced me out 18 months ago. He held up his hands. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to help. Why would you help me? Because Margot Blackwell destroyed my reputation when I questioned her financial management. She's been laundering money through fake research grants for years. I tried to expose her, and she buried me. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. I've been documenting everything, building a case, but I needed someone willing to stand against her publicly. You're that person. I'm nobody. You're the woman who survived what was meant to kill you. That makes you dangerous to her. He set the flash drive on my table. Financial records, emails, proof of fraud, everything you need to destroy her empire. But Grace, if you use this, she'll come after you harder than before. She already tried to kill me. Next time she won't fail unless we get her first. I stared at the flash drive, this tiny piece of plastic that contained Margot's downfall. Why now? Why not go to the police yourself? Because I'm a discredited former board member with an axe to grind. You're a victim with scars that tell the truth. People will listen to you. He moved toward the door. Think about it. If you decide to fight, call Nate Sullivan. He knows how to reach me. After he left, I picked up the flash drive. So small, so powerful. Dr. Ashford came in for my evening checkup, gently changing my bandages. You have remarkable healing capacity, she said softly. The grafts are taking well. Will I ever look normal again? She paused. You'll look different. The scars will fade, but never completely disappear. However, Grace, beauty isn't about symmetry or perfection. It's about the light that shines from inside. That's easy to say when your face isn't melted. You're right. It is easy for me to say. Dr. Ashford sat down. But I've treated hundreds of burn victims over my career. The ones who heal best aren't the ones with the least damage. They're the ones who decide their scars don't define them. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. You're 8 months pregnant, recovering from massive trauma, and still fighting. You're stronger than you think. That night, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Folders upon folders of documents appeared. Financial statements are showing $500,000 transferred from the Blackwell Foundation to Event Solutions LLC, Brooke Hartley's company, 2 weeks before the attack. Email chains between Margot and Brooke discussing handling the Grace situation. Purchase orders for industrial-grade acid signed with Margot's digital signature. The evidence was devastating. I called Nate Sullivan. I'm ready to fight, I said. Then let's burn her empire to the ground. 3 weeks later, I was released from the hospital. Nate arranged a safe house, a modest apartment near Pike Place Market where tourists wouldn't notice one more person hiding behind a scarf. Dr. Ashford visited weekly to change my dressings and monitor my pregnancy. Detective Monroe coordinated security, paranoid that Margot would strike again. Nate and Roman worked around the clock, building our case. Roman's financial documents proved systematic fraud stretching back 7 years. Margot had funneled over $15 million from the foundation into shell companies, fake research projects, and personal accounts. But we needed more. We needed Brooke Hartley's testimony. Detective Monroe tracked her to a boutique hotel in Portland. When they knocked on her door, Brooke answered with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. I can't testify, she whispered. You don't understand what she'll do to me. She tried to murder a pregnant woman, Monroe said flatly. What could be worse than that? She knows things. About me, about my family, about... Brooke's voice broke. I can't. Nate stepped forward. What if we could protect you, witness protection? New identity. Everything. You can't protect me from her. Nobody can. They returned empty-handed. Without Brooke's testimony, our case was circumstantial, strong but not certain. I was 7.5 months pregnant when the anonymous package arrived. No return address, just my safe house location, which should have been secret. Inside was a flash drive and a note in rushed handwriting. "She's not who you think she is. Watch this before you give up." My hands trembled as I plugged it in. A video file appeared, dated 6 months earlier. I pressed play. The footage was grainy, clearly recorded secretly. Brooke sat across from Margot in what looked like Margot's office. Brooke was crying. "I can't keep lying to him." Brooke's voice was broken. "Ethan deserves to know the truth." "The truth will destroy him," Margot said coldly. "And if you tell him, I'll make sure it destroys you too. I have the paternity test. Remember, the one that proves you're his half-sister?" The room spun. I hit pause. Rewinding. "The paternity test that proves you're his half-sister." No, that couldn't be right. I fast-forwarded. Margot continued. "My father's affair produced you. Ethan's father. Your father. Same man. That makes you siblings. Dear. And if anyone finds out, the scandal will annihilate the Blackwell name." Brooke sobbed. "I didn't know when I met him. I swear, I thought—" "I don't care what you thought. You'll do exactly what I say, or I'll leak this information and make sure both of you are ruined." The video ended. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. Brooke wasn't Ethan's mistress. She was his sister. Margot had known for years and weaponized the secret. I called Nate immediately. "I have something. You need to see this right now." An hour later, Nate, Roman, and Detective Monroe crowded into my tiny living room, watching the video in stunned silence. "This changes everything," Monroe said slowly. "If we can authenticate this video, it proves Margot was blackmailing Brooke. It gives Brooke a motive to cooperate with the attack, but it also proves she was coerced. More than that," Nate added, "it proves Margot has been covering up family secrets for years. If she'd kill to hide the Grace situation, she'd definitely kill to hide this." "We need to find Brooke," I said. "She's in danger." Monroe pulled out her phone. "I'll put out an alert." Her phone rang before she could dial. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. "When where?" She closed her eyes. "Understood. I'm on my way." She looked at us. Brooke Hartley's car was found at the bottom of a cliff on Highway 101, 2 hours south of Portland. She's dead. Apparent suicide. The room went silent. "No." "Oh," I whispered. "No, Margot killed her. There's more," Monroe said grimly. "Brooke left a suicide note. It says, 'I couldn't live with what I did to Grace Blackwell. Margot had nothing to do with it. This is all my fault.'" Roman swore. "Margot's cleaning up loose ends." "The note's convenient," Nate said. "Too convenient." "Doesn't matter." Monroe rubbed her face. "With Brooke dead and a confession note, the DA won't touch Margot. The case is closed." "What about the financial fraud? White-collar crime takes years to prosecute, and Margot will tie it up in appeals forever. Grace, I'm sorry, but without Brooke's testimony, we have nothing strong enough to charge her with attempted murder." "So she wins." My voice was hollow. "She kills someone, frames a dead woman, and walks away." Nobody answered. That night, I sat alone in the darkness, feeling my daughter kick inside me. In 3 weeks, she'd be born into a world where her father's family had tried to murder her mother, where justice was bought and paid for, where monsters wore designer clothes and smiled for cameras. I pressed my hand to my belly. "I'm sorry, baby girl. I tried. I tried so hard." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you go public now, your daughter dies with you. Drop it." I stared at the threat, and something inside me snapped. No more hiding. No more fear. If Margot wanted war, I'd give her war. I went into labor 3 days after Brooke's funeral. Stress-induced, Dr. Ashford said, my body deciding it couldn't hold on any longer. The contractions started at midnight, sharp and relentless. Nate drove me to Harborview, calling Dr. Ashford en route. By the time we arrived, I was already 4 centimeters dilated. "Where's Ethan?" a nurse asked. "Not coming," I said through gritted teeth. But he came anyway. burst through the delivery room doors at 3 a.m., still wearing scrubs from an emergency surgery, eyes wild with panic. Grace, get out. I have a right to be here. She's my daughter too. You lost that right when you chose your sister over us. Another contraction tore through me. Get out. Dr. Ashford stepped between us. Mr. Blackwell, unless your wife wants you here, you need to leave. Grace, please, I'm sorry. For everything. For not believing you. For not protecting you. You're sorry, I laughed. A broken sound. Your sister murdered Brooke. She tried to murder me. And you're sorry. I did not know about Brooke being my half-sister until after the attack. His voice cracked. Margot told me right before Brooke died. She said if I had testified against her, she'd leak the dye test and destroy me. Grace, I was trying to protect yourself. You were protecting yourself. Tears streamed down my face. Not me, not our baby. Yourself. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, I screamed. Now get out of my delivery room before I have security remove you. He left. I didn't see him again for 6 days. Emma Rose Blackwell was born at 5:47 a.m., weighing 6 pounds, 2 ounces. She was perfect. Tiny fingers, dark hair, lungs that worked beautifully when she screamed. They placed her on my chest, and I sobbed into her soft head. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect us better. But Emma didn't care about my scars or my failures. She just needed her mother. The first 48 hours were critical. Emma's lungs were slightly underdeveloped from the premature birth. She spent time in the NICU under warming lights, monitors tracking every heartbeat. I barely left her side, pumping breast milk every 3 hours, refusing to sleep. On day 3, her oxygen levels stabilized. Dr. Ashford smiled. She's a fighter, just like you. Nate visited, bringing flowers and news. Brooke's autopsy came back. The medical examiner found defensive wounds on her hands and DNA under her fingernails that doesn't match hers. My heart leaped. Margot's, they're running the comparison now. If it matches, we can reopen the investigation. How long? 2 weeks for results. 2 weeks felt like eternity. Roman Pierce came by with a legal document. I've filed a civil suit against Margot and the Blackwell Foundation. The fraud charges won't put her in prison, but they'll bankrupt her. Every asset, every account, frozen until trial. She'll fight back. Let her. Fighting means exposure. The more she struggles, the more people will see who she really is. On day 5, Detective Monroe arrived with better news. The DNA is a match. Margot's DNA was under Brooke's fingernails. We're getting a warrant for her arrest. I closed my eyes, relief flooding through me. Finally. There's more. We pulled phone records. Margot called Brooke 17 times the day she died. The last call lasted 12 minutes and pinged off a tower near the cliff where Brooke's car went over. So Margot was there, almost certainly. We're building a case for murder, not just attempted murder on you. The DA thinks we can make it stick. That night, I held Emma against my chest, her tiny heartbeat steady and strong, and whispered, we did it, baby girl. We're going to win. But I should have known better than to celebrate too soon. The next morning, news broke nationwide. A press conference at Blackwell's Foundation headquarters. I watched on my hospital room television as Margot, immaculate in navy blue, stood before a podium surrounded by lawyers. I am devastated by these baseless accusations, she said, her voice steady. Brooke Hartley was like a daughter to me. Her tragic suicide has been weaponized by a troubled woman seeking financial gain. I have cooperated fully with police, provided all requested documentation, and I'm confident the truth will prevail. The cameras flashed. A reporter shouted, is it true you're being charged with murder? I am not being charged with anything. Detective Monroe obtained an illegal warrant based on contaminated evidence. My attorneys are filing motions to dismiss. I watched, numb, as she painted herself as the victim, as she turned my pain into publicity for herself. My phone rang. Nate. Don't panic, he said immediately. She's putting on a show. The day evidence is solid. She's going to get away with it, again. No, she's not. I promise you, Grace, she's not. But his voice carried doubt. That afternoon, Ethan finally appeared. He stood in the doorway of my hospital room, staring at Emma sleeping in my arms. "Can I hold her on?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. He cradled Emma like she was made of glass, tears sliding down his face. "She's perfect." "Yes." "Grace, I need to tell you something." He kept his eyes on Emma. "I'm testifying against Margot. I don't care what it costs me. She tried to kill you. She killed Brooke. I won't let her destroy our daughter's mother." "Why now? Why not weeks ago?" "Because I was a coward. Because I was so used to protecting the Blackwell name that I forgot to protect the people I love." He looked up, his eyes red. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just telling you. I'm going to make this right." "Nothing makes this right." "I know." He gently handed Emma back to me. "But I have to try." After he left, I looked down at my daughter's peaceful face. She deserved better than this broken family, this legacy of lies and violence. She deserved justice, and I would get it for her, no matter what. 2 months later, the trial began. Washington State Superior Court, downtown Seattle, where justice moved slowly but moved nonetheless. Margot Blackwell sat at the defense table in a cream suit, surrounded by 5 lawyers from the state's most expensive firm. She looked calm, confident, untouchable. I sat in the gallery, Emma with a sitter, my scars visible. Nate had advised against covering them. "Let the jury see what she did," he'd said. "Let them see the truth." The prosecution was led by DA Catherine Walsh, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a reputation for destroying powerful defendants. Her opening statement was surgical. "This case is about power," she began, pacing before the jury. "The power to hurt, the power to hide, the power to kill." Margot Blackwell believed she was above consequences. She believed money could erase crimes. She was wrong. She presented the evidence methodically. The financial records showing fraudulent transfers, the purchase order for industrial acid, email chains between Margot and Brooke discussing handling the Grace situation, the video of Margot blackmailing Brooke about the DNA test. And finally, Walsh said, "We have DNA evidence. Margot Blackwell's DNA was found under Brooke Hartley's fingernails. Brooke fought her killer, and that killer was Margot Blackwell." The defense attorney, a slick man named Richard Sterling, stood for his opening. "The prosecution wants you to believe my client is a monster. But what they're really asking you to believe is that a successful businesswoman, a philanthropist, a woman who's donated millions to medical research, suddenly became a murderer. Why, over a family squabble, it's absurd." He painted Brooke as mentally unstable, Grace as opportunistic, the DNA evidence as contaminated. "My client's DNA could have gotten under Ms. Hartley's nails a dozen innocent ways. They work together daily. This is a rush to judgment against a woman who's done nothing but serve her community." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Roman Pierce testified about the financial fraud, presenting documents that proved Margot had systematically stolen from the foundation. Under cross-examination, Sterling tried to discredit him. "Mr. Pierce, isn't it true you were fired from the Blackwell Foundation for embezzlement?" "I was forced out for questioning Margot's accounting practices." "That's not what the termination letter says." "The termination letter was written by Margot Blackwell." Detective Monroe testified about the investigation, the evidence trail, Margot's connection to both crimes. Sterling attacked the warrant, the chain of custody, every procedural detail. Dr. Ashford testified about my injuries, the psychological impact, the permanence of the scarring. Sterling insinuated I'd done it to myself for money. "Isn't it possible, doctor, that Mrs. Blackwell staged this attack?" "Absolutely not. The burn patterns are consistent with assault, not self-infliction. But you can't say with medical certainty. I can say with complete certainty that no one would do this to themselves while pregnant." Then Ethan took the stand. The courtroom went silent as he was sworn in. He looked diminished, older, broken. "Mr. Blackwell," Walsh began gently, "tell the jury about your relationship with your sister. Margot raised me after our parents died. She was 22. I was 19. She put me through medical school, built the foundation, created everything we have. I trusted her completely. When did that trust break?" When I learned she'd tried to kill my wife, Sterling objected. Speculation. I'll rephrase, Walsh said. When did you learn about the attack on Grace? The night it happened. I was still at the gala when hospital security called. When I saw Grace, his voice cracked. I knew someone had tried to end her life. Did you suspect your sister? No, not at first. Margot had an alibi, witnesses. But then the evidence started mounting. The financial records, the video of her blackmailing Brooke. And when Brooke died, he closed his eyes. I knew. I knew Margot had killed her to keep her quiet. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because Margot threatened to expose family secrets that would destroy me. She said if I testified, she'd leak information about Brooke being my half-sister, information I didn't even know until after the attack. I was scared, ashamed, weak. He looked directly at me. I failed Grace. I failed my daughter. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Sterling's cross-examination was brutal. He painted Ethan as a liar, a philanderer, a man trying to save himself by destroying his sister. But Ethan held firm. Finally, I took the stand. My hands trembled as I placed them on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Walsh approached gently. Mrs. Blackwell, please tell the jury what happened the night of the attack. I recounted everything. The gala, the hotel key card, the garage. Margot's voice in the darkness. Brooke's trembling apology. The acid burning through my skin. Why didn't you scream immediately? Sterling asked on cross-examination. I couldn't. The pain was so overwhelming. Or perhaps because you knew the security cameras were watching and you needed to create a believable performance. Objection, Walsh stood. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Sterling smiled coldly. Mrs. Blackwell, isn't it true you married Ethan for his money? No. So, you worked as a museum assistant making $40,000 a year. Then you married a billionaire. Quite an upgrade. I married him because I loved him. And when that love faded, you needed a new plan, a way to access the Blackwell fortune. So you staged an attack, blamed it on Margot, and hoped to collect damages. That's insane. Is it you're suing the foundation for $50 million because they tried to kill me, or because you're an opportunist who saw a chance to get rich? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him see the truth. Instead, I lifted my chin. Look at my face, Mr. Sterling. Really look at it. Do you think anyone would do this for money? These scars will never heal completely. My daughter will grow up asking why mommy looks different. Every mirror, every photograph, every stranger's stare will remind me of the night Margot Blackwell tried to erase me. So yes, I'm suing for $50 million because that's what it costs to rebuild a life she tried to destroy. The courtroom went silent. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of waiting, praying, hoping. When they returned, the foreman stood. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder of Brooke Hartley, we find the defendant guilty. Margot's face went white. On the count of attempted murder of Grace Blackwell, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. The gavel came down. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. As bailiffs led Margot away in handcuffs, she turned and locked eyes with me. No fear, no remorse. Just cold, calculated rage. This isn't over, she mouthed. But it was. Margot Blackwell was sentenced to 30 years without parole. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Holbrook, showed no mercy. You abused your position, betrayed your family, and took a life. Judge Holbrook said, the court finds no mitigating factors. You weaponized your wealth and power to destroy those who trusted you most. This court will not tolerate such calculated cruelty. You are remanded to Washington Corrections Center for Women. I watched from the gallery as they led her away. She didn't look back, but her shoulders were rigid with fury. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe fully. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Nate shielded me from the cameras, but I stopped him. Let them see, I said quietly. I turned to face the microphones, my scars visible in the afternoon light. Justice doesn't erase what happened to me then, but it proves that wealth can't buy immunity from consequences. I hope every survivor watching knows your voice matters. The truth matters. Keep fighting. The footage went viral within hours. The civil suit was settled 3 weeks later. The Blackwell Foundation agreed to pay $45 million in damages. Nate took his percentage, donated half to burn victim charities, and set up the rest in a trust for Emma's future. "You're set for life," Diddy told me over coffee at our usual spot near Pike Place Market. "You never have to worry about money again. You can focus on healing, on Emma, on whatever comes next." But money didn't heal scars. It couldn't give me back the face I'd lost or the innocence I'd had before that night in the garage. Still, to me, it meant security. It meant Emma would never struggle the way I had growing up. "Thank you, Buntham," I said, "for everything, for believing me when nobody else did." "You made it easy," Nate replied. "You never wavered. Even when things looked impossible, you kept pushing forward. That's rare. Grace, that kind of strength is extraordinary." I moved out of the safe house into a modest home in Ballard, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and neighbors who didn't care about my past. The house had a small garden where I planted roses and lavender, flowers that reminded me of my mother. Emma's nursery had yellow walls and white furniture. I painted clouds on the ceiling myself, standing on a ladder at midnight while she slept, each brushstroke an act of reclaiming normalcy. The first night in our new home, I sat in the rocking chair beside Emma's crib, watching her chest rise and fall. This was ours. No Blackwell money had touched this place. I'd bought it with the settlement, yes, but I'd chosen every detail. The creaky floorboards, the window seat overlooking the street, the imperfect beauty of something real. Ethan and I divorced quietly. No drama, no press conference, just paperwork and signatures at a lawyer's office downtown. We sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. He set up a trust for Emma and agreed to supervise visitation once a month. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said when we signed the papers. "I just want to be in her life. She deserves to know her father, even if he failed spectacularly at being a husband. She deserves to know her father, even if I can't forgive him," I replied. My voice was steady, empty of the anger that had consumed me for months. I'd realized something important. Holding on to rage was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I needed to let it go, not for him, but for myself. "Fair enough." He hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth. Grace, you are the bravest person I've ever known. I wish I'd been worthy of you." "So do I said softly by him. After he left, I cried. Not for him, not for our marriage, but for the version of myself who'd believed in fairy tales. She was gone forever, and I needed to mourn her properly before I could move forward. Dr. Ashford continued my scar revision surgeries. 6 procedures over 8 months, each one improving the texture, fading the discoloration, making me look more human, but the woman in the mirror would never be the woman I was before. During one post-op appointment, Dr. Ashford studied my face carefully. "The healing is remarkable. You're responding better than I'd hoped. Will I ever look normal?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You'll look like someone who survived. And Grace, that's more beautiful than perfect symmetry could ever be." I learned to accept that. Slowly, painfully. I learned to see my reflection without flinching. Roman Pierce and I became friends. He'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and understood grief, understood starting over. We had coffee every Tuesday at a cafe near Pike Place Market, talking about everything except trauma, books, music, Emma's latest milestones, the stupidity of Seattle drivers. "You're rebuilding yourself," he observed one morning, watching me laugh at something ridiculous. "That takes courage. Or stupidity. I'm not sure which." "Courage," he said firmly. "Definitely courage." 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Washington Correction Center. Margot had written to me, against my better judgment, against Nate's strong advice. I opened it. The handwriting was elegant, controlled, unchanged by imprisonment. "Dear Grace, you may have won in court, but you'll never win in life. Every time you look in the mirror, you'll see what I did to you. Every time your daughter asks about your scars, you'll remember me. I'm in your head forever. You are welcome." Margot. I read it twice, then did something unexpected. I laughed. Because she was right. In a way, I would carry those scars forever. But they weren't marks of shame anymore. They were proof I'd survived. Proof I'd fought back. Proof that even fire couldn't destroy me. I wrote back, "Dear Margot, you're right. I'll never forget you. But neither will anyone else. Your name is now synonymous with cruelty, cowardice, and murder. You'll spend the next 30 years in a cell while I raise my daughter in the sunlight. I'll teach her that scars tell stories of survival, that justice, though slow, is real, that monsters pretend to be human, but truth always exposes them eventually. Thank you for trying to kill me. You made me stronger than I ever imagined. Grace." I never mailed it. I didn't need to. Writing it was enough. Instead, I started a nonprofit, the Whitmore Foundation for Burn Survivors. We provided free scar revision surgeries, therapy, legal assistance, and community support. Roman Pierce donated the initial funding. Nate Sullivan served on the board. Dr. Ashford became our medical director. Our first clinic opened in South Seattle, in a neighborhood where people understood struggle. The waiting room had comfortable chairs, children's books, and photographs of survivors, beautiful despite their scars. Above the reception desk, I hung a quote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." On opening day, a young woman came in. She was 19. Her face burned in a house fire, her eyes haunted with the same despair I'd felt in my hospital room. "Can you help me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I took her hand, feeling the rough texture of healed burns beneath my fingers. "Yes, I promise we can help you." And I meant it with every scarred inch of my being. Emma turned one on a sunny April morning. I threw a small party in our backyard. Just a few friends, Dr. Ashford, Nate Sullivan, Roman Pierce, and his teenage daughter. No press, no spectacle, just people who cared. Emma smashed her face into a cake decorated with butterflies, laughing as frosting covered her nose. I captured it on my phone, this perfect moment of joy, and felt my heart expand. "She's beautiful," Roman said, standing beside me, just like her mother. I glanced at him, surprised. He'd never said anything like that before. "I have scars," I said automatically. "So do I. Mine just don't show on my skin." He smiled gently. "Grace, you're the strongest person I've ever met. Your scars don't diminish that. They prove it." Something shifted between us. Not love, not yet, but possibility. That evening, after everyone left, I sat on my porch with Emma sleeping against my chest. The Seattle skyline glowed in the distance, the city lights reflecting off Puget Sound. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Happy birthday to Emma. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Maybe next year," I typed back, "maybe." Then a second message appeared. Unknown number. My stomach tightened. But when I opened it, it was unexpected. "Mrs. Blackwell, this is forensic analyst Beth Coleman from WSP Crime Lab. We found additional evidence during our review of the Blackwell case. Can we meet?" I called Detective Monroe immediately. "Did you authorize this?" I asked. "No, but if they found something new, we should hear them out." The next day, I met Beth Coleman, a woman in her 30s with precise movements and intelligent eyes, at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. "What did you find?" I asked. She opened her laptop. "We were reviewing traffic camera footage from the night of your attack. Standard procedure for cold case reviews, even though your case was solved. Look at this." She showed me grainy footage from a camera 3 blocks from my building. A silver Lexus. Timestamp 10:35 p.m. License plate visible. "That's Victoria Hastings' car," Beth said. "She was Margot's personal assistant for 12 years. She quit 2 days after your attack and moved to Vancouver." "Why is that relevant?" "Because we found her DNA in your building's garage, on the electrical panel that was tampered with, and on this." She pulled up another image. "We recovered a partial fingerprint from the thermos Brooke used. It's not Brooke's or Margot's. It's Victoria's." My heart raced. Victoria helped them. More than that, Victoria might have been the one who physically disabled the security cameras and lights. Margot ordered it, Brooke executed it, but Victoria facilitated it. Where is she now? Vancouver. But we can't extradite her without Canadian cooperation, and we'd need to prove she wasn't acting under duress. Detective Monroe leaned forward. If we could get Victoria to testify, we could add conspiracy charges. Margot's already in prison, but this would add years to her sentence. And Victoria, immunity deal if she cooperates. Prison time if she doesn't. I thought about it. More testimony, more trials, more dredging up the past. Do it, I said. Every person who helped Margot should face consequences. Victoria Hastings was arrested in Vancouver 6 weeks later. When offered immunity in exchange for testimony, she broke down and confessed everything. Margot had promised her $500,000 to help with the attack. Victoria had cut the power, disabled the cameras, and provided Brooke with the acid. I thought we were just going to scare her. Victoria sobbed during her deposition. I didn't know they'd actually do it. The supplemental trial was quick. Margot received an additional 10 years. Victoria got 3 years in a Canadian prison. When it was finally truly over, I stood outside the courthouse and breathed deeply. How does it feel? Nate asked. Like I can finally move forward. I said, and I meant it. 2 years after the attack, I stood in front of 200 people at the Seattle Convention Center, the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala. My event? My terms. No champagne fountains or designer gowns, just survivors, advocates, doctors, and donors who believed in second chances. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back, my scars visible. Emma sat in the front row with Roman, clapping her tiny hands, too young to understand but present nonetheless. When I approached the microphone, the room went quiet. 2 years ago, I began, someone tried to erase me. They poured acid on my face, hoping to destroy not just my appearance, but my will to exist. They failed. I paused, letting the words settle. I spent months believing my life was over, that these scars made me less than human, that I'd never be beautiful, never be whole, never be enough. I was wrong about all of it. I touched my scarred cheek. These marks tell a story, not of weakness, but of survival, not of victimhood, but of resilience. Every person in this room carries scars, some visible, some hidden. But all of them prove the same thing: we're still here. Applause rippled through the audience. The Whitmore Foundation exists because I learned something profound through fire. Pain doesn't define us. How we respond to pain defines us. And when we choose to transform our trauma into purpose, we become unstoppable. I gestured to the screens behind me, showing before and after photos of survivors we'd helped. A young man burned in a car accident, a woman scarred by domestic violence, a child recovering from a house fire. All of them smiling now, healing now, living now. This year, we provided free surgeries to 68 survivors. We funded therapy for 212 families. We helped prosecute 7 cases of assault with corrosive substances. And we're just getting started. More applause. I spotted Dr. Ashford in the crowd, smiling through tears. To everyone who thinks their scars make them less, you're wrong. Your scars make you warriors. And warriors change the world. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, Roman found me backstage. That was incredible. It was true, and I said simply. He hesitated, then took my hand. Grace, I need to tell you something. Over these past 2 years, watching you rebuild yourself, watching you turn pain into purpose, I've fallen in love with you. I stared at him, surprised. You don't have to say anything, he continued quickly. I just needed you to know. You're the strongest, most remarkable person I've ever met. Scars and all, especially scars and all. I thought about Ethan, who'd loved me when I was easy to love, who'd faltered when love required courage. Then I thought about Roman, who'd seen me at my lowest and stayed anyway, who'd helped me fight without expecting anything in return, who looked at my scars and saw strength. I'm not ready for love yet, I said honestly, but I think I could be, eventually. He smiled. I can wait. That night, I tucked Emma into bed, singing her a lullaby my mother used to sing. She grabbed my finger with her tiny hand, her eyes already closing. You're safe, baby girl, I whispered. You're so loved, and Mommy's going to make sure you grow up in a world where monsters don't win. My phone buzzed. a message from an unknown number. My stomach clenched reflexively, but when I opened it, I found something unexpected. A photo of Margot in prison, looking gaunt and aged, her elegance stripped away. Below it, a message from Detective Monroe. Thought you'd want to see this. Justice looks good on her. I smiled and deleted it. I didn't need to see Margot's downfall to know I'd won. I looked at myself in Emma's nursery mirror. The scars had faded to pale pink lines. My face would never be symmetrical again. I would never be the woman I was before. I was someone better. Someone forged by fire. Someone who'd walked through hell and emerged carrying light. I thought about all the survivors I'd met. The woman burned by her ex-husband, who now runs a domestic violence shelter. The teenager scalded in a restaurant accident who became a chef. The veteran injured in combat who mentors other wounded soldiers. We were an army of the scarred, and we were changing the world. As I turned off the nursery light and headed to my own room, I passed the framed quote Dr. Ashford had given me years ago. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. I used to hate that quote. Now I understood it. Margot Blackwell tried to destroy me with acid. Instead, she gave me purpose. She gave me strength. She gave me a story worth telling. And every survivor I helped, every life I changed, every person who saw their scars as proof of resilience instead of shame, was my revenge. Not violence, not hatred, but transformation. I climbed into bed and closed my eyes, Emma's baby monitor humming softly on my nightstand. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and do it again. Help another survivor. Fund another surgery. Tell another story. Because that's what warriors do. We rise. We rebuild. We refuse to be erased. The fire tried to consume me. Instead, it forged me into something unbreakable, and I would burn bright for the rest of my life.